Guide to cervical cancer. Know the basics on symptoms, diagnosis and treatment to help you deal with this disease. In the U.S., an estimated 13,200 women are newly diagnosed with invasive cervical cancer during a single year. Cervical cancer claims the lives of about 4,250 women yearly, according to the latest figures from the American Cancer Society. When detected early, cervical cancer is considered highly treatable and curable. Fortunately, with routine screening, earlier stage cervical cancers are more commonly discovered than more advanced, later stage cervical cancers. Women of all ages are at risk. The average age for cervical cancer diagnosis is 49 years, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. However, cervical cancer can occur among women in their 20s. What is cervical cancer? Cervical cancer is a cancer of a woman's reproductive system. The cervix is the lower, narrow part of the womb, or uterus. The cervical opening connects the uterus to the vagina. In cervical cancer, healthy cells of the cervix undergo genetic changes, or mutations. These abnormal cells grow out of control and form tumors. Precancerous changes in the cells, called dysplasia, can slowly develop over many years. If caught in time, they can be removed. Cervical cancer is most often caused by the human papillomavirus, or HPV. Infection with HPV, which usually occurs through sexual contact, is common in men and women alike. Typically, the body's immune system clears the virus on its own. In a minority of women, however, certain types of HPV may persist and cause cancerous changes in the cervix. Up to 90% of cervical cancers are squamous cell cancers based on the type of cervical cells in which they originate. Other cervical cancers, called adenocarcinomas, develop from gland cells within the cervix. Pap tests, also called Pap smears, detect precancerous changes or cancerous cervical cells. A different screening method uses HPV testing. A positive HPV test reveals that you have an HPV virus type that may be linked to cervical cancer. Signs and symptoms. Classic signs of cervical cancer include irregular or dysfunctional vaginal bleeding, watery or malodorous vaginal discharge and abdominal or pelvic pain, says Dr. Amanda Fader, director of the Kelly Gynecologic Oncology Service and the Center for Rare Gynecologic Cancers at Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore. Many of the cervical cancer lesions, or masses, start on the external surface of the cervix that protrudes into the vagina, Fader says. With sexual intercourse and penetration, that can cause a little disruption of the lesion or tumor, and that can present with abnormal bleeding. Talk to your gynecologist or primary care provider if you have these symptoms. Your clinician will get your medical history, then perform a physical exam. The exam involves a sterile speculum as well as a bimanual, or two-handed exam of the vagina, cervix and rectal areas, Fader explains. It's important for doctors to listen carefully and seek more information when women bring up concerns such as abnormal discharge or spotting after intercourse, says Dr. Jennifer Muller, a surgeon who specializes in caring for women with gynecologic cancers at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York City. Even if you feel fine, you should periodically undergo a careful physical exam including visualization of the cervix. Sometimes a woman can have a completely normal Pap smear but an obvious lesion on the cervix, Muller says. You should biopsy that. Pap smears are not 100% sensitive and specific tests, they're screening tests. Diagnosis. Women evaluated for possible cervical cancer may go through a process like this. Symptoms like spotting or abnormal vaginal discharge raise concern. A doctor's office visit includes a detailed history and a thorough gynecological exam. A screening test like a Pap smear reveals unusual or abnormal cells. Colposcopy, an exam of the cervix, vagina and vulva using a special scope, is performed. Biopsy of tissue from the cervix and surrounding areas is done, if indicated. In the laboratory, cancer cells are found under the microscope. In some cases, Muller says, imaging tests used for a different reason, for instance during an emergency room visit, might unexpectedly show a lesion on a woman's cervix. Stages. Once cervical cancer is diagnosed, CT scans, X-rays, MRIs and positron emission tomography, or PET scans, help reveal its extent. Imaging can show whether cancer has spread outside the cervix. Cervical cancer is broadly classified into 4 stages. Precise levels exist within stages, depending on tumor size and other features. Stage 1 cervical cancer is limited to the cervix. Stage 2 cervical cancer is also seen in nearby areas of the vagina but is still confined to the pelvis. Stage 3 cervical cancer has spread to the pelvic wall and may affect the kidneys. Stage 4 or late cervical cancer has spread to other parts of the body, including nearby areas like the rectum, or distant organs such as the liver, bones or lungs. Cancer may also have spread to the lymph nodes. Recurrent cervical cancer has returned to the body after previous treatment. Treatment surgery is the mainstay treatment for early-stage cervical cancer. If you have stage 1 cervical cancer, your treatment team will discuss surgical options with you, including risks and benefits. Your fertility goals should also be considered when making treatment decisions. Depending on whether the woman desires future fertility, there are different types of procedures that can be performed in order to treat the cancer, Fader says. Some of them can be uterine sparing if the cancer is early enough in the process. But the standard for early-stage cervical cancer is either a hysterectomy or a radical hysterectomy. In simple hysterectomy, the cervix and uterus are removed. In radical hysterectomy, part of the vagina and nearby lymph nodes are also removed, along with the cervix and uterus. A hysterectomy can be performed as a traditional open surgery involving an abdominal incision. Minimally invasive surgery, by contrast, is done using a laparoscope, with specialized surgical tools inserted via tiny incisions. Robotic-assisted laparoscopy is one type of laparoscopic surgery. Minimally invasive caution. Recent evidence raises questions regarding minimally invasive surgery for early-stage cervical cancer. The first of 2 studies published in the November 15, 2018, New England Journal of Medicine compared outcomes for about 630 women with stage 1 cervical cancer randomly assigned to receive either minimally invasive surgery or open radical hysterectomy in 33 hospitals worldwide. Unexpectedly, researchers found that women undergoing minimally invasive procedures had higher rates of cancer recurrence and worse disease-free and overall survival rates. These findings were significant enough to stop the study sooner than planned. The second study followed nearly 2,500 women treated either with standard or minimally invasive hysterectomies between 2010 and 2013. Over a 4-year period, death rates were 9.1% for women who underwent minimally invasive surgery compared with 5.3% for open surgery. Previous studies had not shown such contrasting outcomes. We now routinely talk to patients about the multi-centered trial and explain the difference in outcomes, Muller says. And so for women with stage 1 cervix cancer, it's always been standard to do open surgery. But now we really carefully talk about the alternatives in the context of this trial so women understand at this point, open surgery may be the safest approach for them to have their best outcomes from a cancer standpoint. However, such differences in outcomes between traditional and minimally invasive procedures have not been found in uterine cancer, also known as endometrial cancer, Muller notes. Because women don't always separate their cervix from their endometrium, I try to provide education for people so they understand that it is actually safe and reasonable for women with endometrial cancer to have robotic or laparoscopic surgery. Surgery recovery. With open surgery, many women receive a bikini-cut surgical incision, similar to a cesarean section, Muller says. Whether it's an up and down or side-to-side incision, she adds, you do need to spend a few nights in the hospital to make sure you're well, your incision is healing and you can get up and around and have something to eat. Recovery from open surgery varies with each woman, but this major abdominal surgery usually requires several weeks of recovery at home after leaving the hospital. The need for pain medication varies depending on a woman's pain tolerance and threshold. Chemo and radiation. With later-stage cervical cancer, surgery is not usually the mainstay of treatment, Fader says. While nuances exist, she says, chemotherapy and radiation are usually the go-to treatments in that setting. It depends on how late the stage is, whether one uses both chemotherapy and radiation, or just chemotherapy alone. In some situations, for patients diagnosed with stage 1 cervical cancer, additional risk factors may only become apparent from pathology results following surgery, Muller notes. In this situation, she says, the team may tell patients, we think you're at increased risk of this cancer returning, or a recurrence, so we're going to design a chemotherapy plan to take care of any remaining cells that could put you at risk of the cancer coming back. Fertility preservation. If you're planning to possibly have children someday, fertility preservation should be part of the initial treatment discussion. Women with small, localized cervical cancers may qualify for less aggressive strategies like a cone biopsy to remove cancerous tissue from the cervix. In other cases, a procedure called a trachelectomy can be used to remove the cervix and part of the vagina, but retain the rest of the uterus. A reproductive endocrinologist can describe non-surgical options like freezing your eggs, or cryopreservation. Where to go for treatment. It's important for a woman with cervical cancer to seek treatment from a gynecologic oncologist, Fader says. These specialists have years of surgical and oncology training, and they tend to treat a higher volume of women with cervical cancer. Whether clinicians practice by guidelines is an important consideration, Muller says. The idea of a cancer center or a center of excellence is really that people are driven through guidelines and evidence-based care, she says. Seeking a second opinion helps clarify if you're getting treatment recommendations based on evidence and guidelines, whether at a cancer center or community hospital. What to ask your doctor when you're diagnosed with cervical cancer. Asking questions like these can help you better understand your condition and participate in decision-making. What are all my treatment options? Do you have fertility options? What surgical route do you recommend? What is your surgical volume and what are your outcomes for this procedure? How will a procedure affect my quality of life and sexual health? In general, what can I expect after a hysterectomy? Should I consider chemotherapy and radiation, and why? Are research studies like clinical trials available at your center? Always bring a loved one with you to your appointments, Muller advises. Because if you're on your own trying to process all this information, it's still quite a shock to be diagnosed with a cancer. It's a journey. Having someone who could be taking notes, who can ask the tough questions you're uncomfortable to ask or you don't think to ask, who can be your ears and your eyes and your heart in the room, too, is so powerful. Reducing your risk of cervical cancer. Cervical cancer is a highly preventable and curable disease if caught early. January, Cervical Health Awareness Month, serves as an important reminder to speak with your doctor about how to protect yourself against human papillomavirus infection and to screen for cervical cancer. While the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists recommends annual gynecological examinations for healthy women, recent recommendations have changed for cervical cancer screening. It's important to be aware of preventative HPV vaccinations as well as the recommended timeline for screenings. As a gynecologic oncologist at Montefiore Health System in Bronx, New York, I work to educate my patients about cervical cancer and how to decrease their risk of getting this disease. Here are some important questions and answers I use to help reduce the risk of getting cervical cancer. I encourage you to have this conversation with your physician, too. Who gets cervical cancer? In the United States, cervical cancer is the third most common type of cancer of the female reproductive system, and the third most common cause of death from cancers of the female genital tract. Your risk of contracting and dying from cervical cancer is higher in countries where there isn't screening for cancer and pre-cancer. Screening tools, such as a Papa-Nicolau test (PAP test) or other equivalent, help decrease cervical cancer deaths by 75% in countries with such programs. Sadly, we know that women who have never been screened account for more than half of all women with cervical cancer. Research shows that the average age for developing cervical cancer in the United States is 48, and the risk for having cervical cancer before age 21 is less than 1%. Despite your age, it's important to be aware of the risk factors associated with cervical cancer, including conditions that impair your immune system, such as HIV, early onset of sexual activity, multiple sexual partners, a high-risk sexual partner who has multiple partners or HPV infection, and history of sexually transmitted infections like chlamydia or genital herpes. Finally, cervical cancer is more common in communities with higher poverty levels and among non-white women. If you think you may be at an increased risk for cervical cancer, please discuss your risk factors with your physician, and ask how you can schedule regular screenings and possibly even receive preventative treatments. What causes cervical cancer? HPV is responsible for the development of more than 99% of cervical cancers. In fact, the connection between HPV and cervical cancer is stronger than the association between smoking and lung cancer. It's important to recognize that HPV infection is very common and affects up to 80% of sexually active women in the U.S. Despite the high prevalence of HPV nationwide, the majority of women who contract HPV will clear the infection and never go on to develop cervical cancer. However, it's believed that persistent infection causes pre-cancerous changes in the cells of the cervix, and if left untreated over a long period of time, this can potentially progress to invasive cancer. What can I do to reduce my risk of cervical cancer? In recent years, vaccinations against HPV have been introduced for both adolescent males and females. This vaccination has the potential to make an impactful difference. If 70% of the population gets this vaccination, over time, it's predicted to help decrease cervical cancers in the U.S. by over 300,000 cases every year. Currently, countries that have achieved vaccination of over 70% have already reported up to 40% decreases in development of high-risk precancers. Who should be vaccinated against HPV? The Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices in the United States recommends vaccination of girls and boys aged 11 to 12, however, children as young as 9 can be vaccinated. Females who have not been vaccinated or who did not complete their vaccinations should have catch-up vaccinations from the ages of 13 to 26. Standard HPV vaccination has not been shown to help women of older ages or who have already had cervical cancer. When should I get screened for cervical cancer? Screening for cervical cancer should start for women ages 21 and older who have normal immune systems and who do not have cancer symptoms. Women who are between 21 and 30 should get screened with a Pap test every 3 years. The most recent guidelines suggest that screening with Pap testing alone is safe for women 30 and older, and that screening intervals can be lengthened to every 5 years if HPV testing is performed with the Pap test. While these are general recommendations, it is important that each patient be evaluated by her doctor to discuss coexisting conditions, medical history and any history of a compromised immune system or abnormal Pap testing. While recent advances in testing for the HPV virus have changed recommendations for treatment and screening intervals, it's important to discuss your risks with your physician and not delay HPV vaccinations and cervical cancer screenings. Cervical cancer is a highly preventable and curable disease if caught early enough. What are survival rates for cervical cancer? Most women do well if cancer is detected and treated early. Cervical cancer is treatable and even curable, but it remains lethal for some women. Cervical cancer used to be the No. 1 cause of death for U.S. women, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Today, survival is far more likely. Cervical cancer cases and mortality have dropped significantly over the past 4 decades, although rate decreases have leveled off since 2007. Screening is key. The survival rate is more than 90% for women whose cervical cancer is caught in early stages. The picture is less optimistic for women who are diagnosed later. Cervical cancer is the 4th leading cause of cancer-related death in women, says Dr. Amanda Fader, an associate professor in the Johns Hopkins Medicine Department of Gynecology and Obstetrics. It's a serious public health problem. Any woman with symptoms of concern should be assessed immediately, says Fader, who is the director of both the Kelly Gynecologic Oncology Service and the Center for Rare Gynecologic Cancers at the Johns Hopkins Hospital. Cervical cancer can be very curable in the early stages and more challenging to cure in the later stages. She says. Cervical cancer, by the numbers. The Surveillance, Epidemiology, and End Results Program of the National Cancer Institute, the American Cancer Society and the CDC all track and report on U.S. cervical cancer trends. The term, 5-year survival, refers to patients who live 5 years or more after diagnosis. Mortality refers to related deaths per 100,000 women in the population. Individual cases will vary depending on treatment and other factors, but these figures represent overall U.S. survival, mortality and incidence rates for cervical cancer. Cervical cancer will kill about 4,250 U.S. women in 2019, ACS estimate. Nearly 13,200 new cases of invasive cervical cancer will be diagnosed in 2019, ACS. The average age of diagnosis is 50. Cases most frequently occur between ages 35 to 44, SEER. For all women with cervical cancer, 5-year survival is 66%, SEER. For white women, 5-year survival is 69%, ACS. For black women, 5-year survival is 56%, ACS. In early, localized cervical cancer, 5-year survival is 92%, SEER. For cervical cancer that has spread nearby in the body, 5-year survival is 57%, SEER. For cervical cancer spread to distant areas of the body, 5-year survival is 17%, SEER. Cervical cancer rates are rising for women in rural, non-metropolitan areas, CDC. Increased screening lowered the incidence of invasive cervical cancer by 50% between 1975 and 2014, ACS. Cervical cancer mortality rates are underestimated, particularly in black women, Fader says. The magnitude of this health disparity wasn't realized until a recent study adjusted figures to account for hysterectomies performed overall, using national data from 2000 to 2012. Cervical cancer mortality for black women was about double that of white women during that period. Black women aged 85 or older had the highest mortality rate with 37 deaths from cervical cancer per 100,000 women, according to the study published in the March 15, 2017, issue of the journal Cancer. How survival feels. Keziah Corey did not have any physical symptoms of cervical cancer. Fortunately, routine screening picked up the disease as soon as possible. Even so, that didn't make the 2016 diagnosis any less overwhelming for Corey, then 33, a Seattle resident and mother of 2 young children. The weeks of waiting for her disease first to be staged, then treatment to start, were excruciating. There are so many rabbit holes your mind can go down when you're told you have cancer, Corey says. Working out to feel stronger, practicing meditation to clear her head and keeping busy with her kids all helped her stay as positive as she could during a time when she often felt frightened and weak. Corey first had a cone biopsy to see how far cancer had progressed. 6 weeks later, she underwent a hysterectomy. It was a hard physical recovery, she says. At the time, my kids were 2 and 4, and I could not pick them up. I could not bend. After surgery, her mother took the children to give Corey a much-needed, 10-day respite. It was a slow progression in getting back to a very physically demanding daily life with 2 little ones, Corey says. That was a struggle. I may have pushed myself a little too hard, too fast. Because you don't think to slow down for your children. Emotionally, it took a year or so for Corey to come to terms with her diagnosis and decide what to do next. She realized she didn't know anyone in her daily life who had gone through a similar experience. She turned to Survivor, a nonprofit organization that supports and shares stories of women with cervical cancer. Corey is thankful for the opportunity to now help other women who are newly diagnosed. She uses her story to advocate for regular cervical cancer screening. She strongly encourages parents to educate themselves about the HPV vaccine for children, which protects them, and some younger adults, from several conditions including cervical cancer. Now, Corey says, she feels great. Yet, she can't take her good health for granted. I get checked annually at this time, she says. All of my screening tests have come back completely clean, so far. I go in next month, so fingers crossed. Waiting for results is definitely anxiety-provoking, she says. Anytime I see my doctor's phone number pop up on my phone, my heart skips a beat. Sensitive conversations. The one-on-one discussion around cervical cancer survival varies with each newly diagnosed patient, says Dr. Jennifer Muller, a surgeon who specializes in caring for women with gynecologic cancers at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York City. It is a curable disease, and we go forward with curable intentions, Muller says. Although it will be different if you're stage 1, versus 2, versus 3, versus 4 for women who are stage 1, 80 to 90% of them are alive at 5 years. That's an excellent survival. With later stage cervical cancer, the discussion will depend on stage, Muller says. It will depend on cell type. And it will also depend on the person in front of me. It's not really about reeling off statistics, Muller says. I find that providing numbers on survival and recurrence risk tends to put the conversation in the wrong light, she explains. Because people, when they're diagnosed, are scared. And they want to have hope and optimism. So you have to walk a line and balance a bit between trying to give people a population level number, which is not a personal number, and also trying to make sure that they have transparency and all the facts that they need to make decisions for themselves. The conversation changes when a woman comes in with advanced cervical cancer, such as cancer that has spread to the lungs, liver and bones. I am talking to them about living as well and as long as possible, Muller says. At this point, surgery is rarely used, while chemotherapy and sometimes radiation may help reduce cancer symptoms. We don't use the word cure if it's not rational or realistic, Muller says. We try to be compassionate and just be there with our patients as they're going through that hard moment. With a safe, effective vaccine for human papillomavirus, or HPV, which causes most cervical cancers, the conversation is moving from survival to prevention. While increased screening like Pap smears is needed to catch more cases of cervical cancer at its earliest, most treatable stages, vaccination with Gardasil is keeping cervical cancer from happening. The Gardasil vaccine is a major medical breakthrough and we have it available to us, Muller says. As early as age 9, both girls and boys can receive their first dose of the vaccine to prevent cervical cancer and other HPV-related conditions including rectal cancer, penile cancer and genital warts. In 2018, the FDA extended vaccination approval for men and women through the age of 45. What are the early signs of cervical cancer? Regular screening is essential for timely detection and treatment. Many women are reluctant to talk about vaginal spotting, unusual discharge or physical discomfort during sex. However, if you have symptoms like these, don't hesitate to speak up, they could be early signs of cervical cancer. Your gynecologist or primary care provider will listen carefully as you describe your symptoms, ask follow-up questions, do a thorough exam and proceed with testing as needed. If cervical cancer is found early, most women do well with surgical treatment. Having awareness of symptoms is crucial. But don't rely on physical symptoms alone as cancer warning signs. Some women with early cervical cancer may not have any symptoms that could prompt a timely discussion with their doctors. Regular screening with methods like Pap tests can detect cancerous or even precancerous changes much sooner. Here's what you should know about the earliest signs of cervical cancer. Early cervical cancer warning signs. If you experience any of these symptoms, let your doctor know. Light bleeding or blood spots between menstrual periods. Vaginal discharge changes, watery, foul smelling or more discharge than usual. Pain or discomfort during sexual intercourse. Bleeding during or after sex, or after a pelvic exam. Increased or extended menstrual bleeding. Pelvic or unexplained back pain. Postmenopausal bleeding. For the vast majority of women, if they have symptoms, it's the early symptoms of discharge, bleeding and spotting, says Dr. Jennifer Muller, a surgeon who specializes in caring for women with gynecologic cancers, including cervical cancer, at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York City. Whether women have symptoms or not, she says, there's the power and importance of the screening test, the Pap smear. The cervix is part of a woman's reproductive anatomy. The cervix is the narrow opening between the vagina and uterus, or womb. During labor, the cervix widens, or dilates, to allow the baby to pass through the vagina. The cervix is made up of 3 main sections. The ectocervix, or lower portion, extends downward into the vagina. The endocervix, the upper portion, comprises the cervical canal connecting the vagina to the uterus. The transformation zone of the cervix, or T-zone, is where the upper and lower portions meet. The T-zone contains 2 types of cervical cells, glandular cells of the endocervix and squamous cells of the ectocervix. The T-zone is where cervical cells are most likely to gradually develop precancerous changes, which could potentially lead to cervical cancer. Your pelvic exam. During a pelvic exam, your gynecologist or other provider uses a speculum to visualize your vagina and cervix. That also allows the clinician to use a swab to collect a sample for a Pap test or an HPV test to help detect cervical cancer. Colposcopy is a procedure using an instrument that provides a magnified view of the cervix during a pelvic exam. Biopsy involves removing a small sample of cervical tissue. A cone biopsy, which is more extensive, removes a cone-shaped tissue section from the cervix. In some cases, a cone biopsy can be used as a treatment to entirely remove precancers or very early cancers from the cervix. Cervical cancer risk factors. Most cervical cancers are caused by the human papillomavirus. HPV is the most common sexually transmitted infection, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Both males and females can be infected with HPV. HPV can cause genital warts and several types of cancer, including anal cancer, throat cancer and cancer of the penis. Any woman who has been sexually active is at risk for HPV infection and cervical cancer. Women with conditions affecting the immune system, such as HIV/AIDS, are at higher risk of cervical cancer. Smoking increases the risk of cervical cancer, as well. Cervical cancer risk rises from late adolescence to a woman's mid-30s. Risk still exists for women in their 40s and beyond. Access to screening has an impact on the odds of developing cervical cancer. Black, Hispanic and American Indian women may be at higher risk for that reason. Crucial cervical cancer screening. Routine screening for cervical cancer really works. Screening catches abnormal cells or malignancies sooner, enabling timely, effective treatment and saving women's lives. If you've being proactive with recommended screenings for cervical cancer, you will either receive a Pap smear, an HPV test or, in some cases, a combination of the two. When should you get cervical cancer screening? These are the current recommendations on cervical cancer screening from the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force, an influential panel of medical experts. They apply to healthy women at average risk for cervical cancer. Women ages 21 to 29 should be screened every 3 years with a Pap test alone. Women ages 30 to 65 should either have a Pap test alone every 3 years, HPV testing alone every 5 years or both tests combined every 5 years. Women over 65 who've previously had adequate screening and aren't otherwise at high risk for cervical cancer do not need screening. Women younger than 21 do not need screening. Women who've had a hysterectomy with removal of the cervix do not need screening. Early detection of cervical cancer is extremely important, says Paul Reiter, an associate professor in the Division of Health Behavior and Health Promotion at the College of Public Health at The Ohio State University. Most cases of cervical cancer can be prevented with regular screening, and then follow-up if any abnormal tests come back, with women receiving appropriate follow-up care, says Reiter, whose research is focused on cancer prevention and control through screening and vaccination. Which screening test should you have? Although both screen for cervical cancer, the HPV and Pap tests reveal two different things. The Pap test detects abnormal cells in the cervix that could become cancerous if untreated, as well as cancer cells. The HPV test detects the presence of high-risk types of the virus in cervical cells. Both the HPV and Pap tests are effective, Reiter says. HPV has been moving to the screening forefront in the last decade or so, he says, and is being increasingly used in conjunction with, or in place of, Pap testing. Muller explains that the recommendation for younger women to receive only Pap screening is meant to avoid overtreatment. In some cases, a young woman might have a normal Pap smear but show positive findings on her HPV test. Young women are more likely to have what we call transient HPV infection, she says. So they're young, they're healthy and their immune systems will clear that virus. Cervical cancer prevention. Many cases of cervical cancer can now be prevented thanks to medical advances. A vaccine called Gardasil 9 helps protect against HPV infection and related cancers. Gardasil vaccination is recommended for both girls and boys, starting at 9 years old. With the HPV types it covers, writer says, Gardasil 9 has the potential to prevent about 80% of all cervical cancers. The vaccine can also prevent genital warts. In October 2018, the Food and Drug Administration expanded its Gardasil 9 approval to include adults ages 27 to 45. Gardasil 9 vaccination is now indicated for females and males from 9 to 45 years old, using a 2 or 3 dose schedule. Women who receive Gardasil need to continue screening for cervical cancer, writer emphasizes. The vaccine protects against the most dangerous, high-risk HPV types, but not all of them, he says. So, although they're vaccinated, they still need to talk with their health provider to make sure they're getting screened as they get older. If your screening test is positive, it's concerning to receive a positive PAP or HPV test, but this is vital health information to act on. The next step is working with your healthcare provider to get a complete examination and follow-up to determine whether precancerous cells are present or make a cervical cancer diagnosis. If cervical cancer is found in early stages, cure rates are excellent with appropriate treatment. 16 health screenings. All women need mammograms, pap smears, colonoscopies and more that will keep you healthy. You feel perfectly fine, and maybe you are. But that's not always the case, hence why health screenings, physical exams, tests and procedures used to detect disease early, are so important. From mammograms to colonoscopies and pap smears, U.S. News talked with the experts about 16 screenings all women need. Gynecological health. All women need regular checkups with their OB/GYN, starting at age 13 to 15, says Shannon Clark, an associate professor in the Division of Maternal-Fetal Medicine at University of Texas Medical Branch Hospitals. Frequency varies until age 21, when appointments, which cater to preventive health services, should become annual. It's very important that all women establish care with an OB/GYN and be routinely seen, Clark says. History and physical exam. History changes for everyone, says Mary Rosser, an obstetrician and gynecologist at Montefiore Medical Center. An annual reassessment may flag risk factors early, before they cause harm or lead to serious or chronic medical conditions. In addition to reviewing changes in family history, doctors should inquire about menstrual history, sexual practices and orientation, social habits, and emotional, physical and sexual abuse. The other component, the physical exam, is an opportunity to assess blood pressure, weight and body mass index, Rosser says. Clinical breast exam. During this physical exam, a doctor will look at and feel your breasts and under your arms for lumps or anything that seems unusual. CBEs should begin at age 20 and be repeated every 1 to 3 years for women ages 20 to 39, and yearly beginning at age 40, Clark says. Self-checks, meanwhile, are easy to do at home, and you ought to check for lumps every month or so. Mammogram. Mammograms are key to the prevention, and early detection, of breast cancer, Rosser says. This is a low-dose X-ray exam of the breasts, and beginning at age 40, women should undergo yearly mammograms. If you're at high risk, with a family history of breast cancer, for example, your doctor may recommend earlier mammograms. STD screening. All women need to be screened for sexually transmitted diseases once they become sexually active, Clark says. Those 25 and younger should receive yearly gonorrhea and chlamydia screenings. After that age, screening depends on risk factors or symptoms. Screening consists of a cervical culture or urine test for gonorrhea and chlamydia, and a blood test for HIV, Clark says. Colorectal cancer. A colonoscopy can lead to the early detection and treatment of colon cancer, which is the third most common cancer diagnosed in both men and women in the U.S. The screening should start at age 13 to 18 for those with pancreatitis or who have a history of familial adenomatous polyposis, a genetic condition that's diagnosed when someone develops more than 100 adenomatous colon polyps. Women ages 19 to 49, meanwhile, should be screened if they're high risk, which includes having inflammatory bowel disease or Crohn's disease. In general, women should undergo a colonoscopy every 10 years starting at age 50, or age 45 for African Americans, who have increased incidence and earlier age of onset. Diabetes. Beginning at age 45, women should be screened for diabetes every 3 years, Rosser says, and earlier if someone is at high risk with factors such as obesity or family history. The disease is the leading cause of heart disease and on the rise in the U.S. due to the obesity epidemic, Rosser says. Early intervention is crucial. Testing is typically done via a fasting plasma glucose test or hemoglobin A1C test. Lipid profile assessment. This panel of blood tests will assess your risk of developing heart disease, plus measure your cholesterol and triglyceride levels. Start at age 13 to 44 if you're at high risk, for example, obese or have a genetic predisposition. Routine screening, repeated every 5 years, starts at age 45, Rosser says. There are dietary changes which may reduce these levels, she adds. Medications are available if diet changes aren't working. Hepatitis B and C. Women at high risk need to think about these screenings beginning at ages 13 to 18, Clark says. Hepatitis B risk factors, for example, include injection drug users, those born in countries where the prevalence of infection is 2% or greater, and HIV-positive people. And risk of hepatitis C increases if you've been exposed to an infected needle, perhaps via tattoo, your birth mother had the disease, or you had a blood transfusion before 1992. Screening frequency depends on your doctor's recommendations. Pap smear. During a Pap smear, cells are scraped from the opening of the cervix to screen for cervical cancer. Though annual screening is common, the United States Preventive Services Task Force recommends a Pap smear every 3 years, starting at age 21 and ending at 65. Any mild irregularities will prompt an HPV test to check for the high-risk strains of the HPV virus, says Carrie Peterson, an internist based in New York. HPV. Human papillomavirus, the most common STD in the U.S., causes cervical and other types of cancer. An HPV test, often done at the same time as a Pap smear, is recommended every 5 years for women ages 30 to 65. Since HPV is so common in women under 30, and experts say it often goes away on its own, the test typically isn't recommended for this age group unless there's an abnormal Pap test result. Pelvic organ prolapse. About 1/3 of women are affected by prolapse or a similar condition over their lifetime, which means one or more of their pelvic organs, bladder, uterus, vagina, small bowel and rectum, stop working properly. Beginning at age 65, women should be screened yearly, Peterson says. Often, patients are aware there's a problem, and notice a change in bladder or bowel habits, but aren't sure what it traces back to. Bone density. Women ages 65 and up should have a bone density scan every 2 years, Rosser says. And if you have risk factors for osteoporosis, such as an eating disorder or sedentary lifestyle, your doctor may recommend the test at a younger age. During a bone density scan, X-rays measure how many grams of calcium and other bone minerals are in a segment of bone. These tests often center on the spine, hip and forearm. Thyroid-stimulating hormone testing. This blood test checks for thyroid problems, such as hyperthyroidism or hypothyroidism. It should begin as recommended between ages 19 to 49 in high-risk women, such as those with an autoimmune disease or family history, and every 5 years starting at age 50, Clark says. Skin cancer. Visit a dermatologist for a thorough skin exam every other year, Peterson says, or sooner if you notice any suspicious spots. Once a month, check for any new or unusual spots, she says. Remember ABCDE, asymmetry, border irregularity, uneven color, diameter bigger than 6 mm and evolving shape and size. Visual acuity. You know this test, it measures the smallest letters you can read on a standardized chart held 20 feet away. The American Optometric Association recommends eye exams at least once every 2 years, Peterson says, though annual exams are suggested for anyone with current vision problems. After the basic test, you'll likely look at an eye chart through a variety of lenses, which will help your doctor determine your glasses or contact lens prescription. Thank you for watching. Please hit the like button and subscribe.